This is your host, Danny, and this is English Plus, a podcast by Plus Podcast Network. Enjoy listening to all Plus Podcast Network shows on Apple Podcasts. Use the link in the description to subscribe now, and now you can get a 7-day free trial before you subscribe to the network. Or if you don't have Apple Podcasts, you can still enjoy all our premium shows on our website, EnglishPlusPodcast.com, if you become a patron of Plus Podcast Network on Patreon. You will also find the link in the description. Welcome to Word Power from English Plus Podcast. Today we're going to learn 10 new words in the context of a story or some information. We're going to talk about Gigantosaurus. Before I start telling you about Gigantosaurus, let me tell you about the 10 words we're going to learn today. We're going to learn paleontologist, amateur, unseat, exhume, serrated, estimate, attribute, theorize, prey, and vegetation. So these are the 10 words we're going to learn today. And now, without further ado, let's learn more about Gigantosaurus first, and then we will stop and talk about these 10 words I told you about in context. And don't forget, before we start, that you can practice all these words we're learning in Word Power on our website, EnglishPlusPodcast.com. You can take the link, go there, you will find a PDF downloadable worksheet, and you will find some interactive activities. So everything you need to make these words part of your permanent vocabulary bank. You can find it all on our website, EnglishPlusPodcast.com, in the custom post we created for this episode. And now let's talk about Gigantosaurus. For many years, paleontologists thought that the Tyrannosaurus rex was the largest meat-eating dinosaurs ever to roam the earth. In 1995, however, an auto mechanic and amateur scientist named Ruben Carolini discovered some bones in Argentina. The discovery was to unseat Tyrannosaurus rex from its position as the largest meat-eating dinosaur. In honor of this discovery, scientists named the new dinosaur Gigantosaurus carolini. After the initial find, scientists exhumed additional pieces of the Gigantosaurus's skeleton. They found parts of the skull, many of the vertebrae, both thigh bones, and some teeth. Each of the curved teeth was 8 inches long and serrated like a saw. From this incomplete skeleton, scientists were able to estimate the dinosaur's size and appearance. According to researchers, the Gigantosaurus was about 42 feet long, making it slightly longer than the Tyrannosaurus rex. The creature ran on its hind legs and had rather small arms. It weighed 6 to 8 tons, making it nearly 3 tons heavier than the largest Tyrannosaurus rex. Scientists do not know exactly what the Gigantosaurus ate, but its teeth have all the attributes of meat-eating animals. So they concluded that the great beast was a carnivore, or meat-eater. Because skeletal remains of dinosaurs do not include skin, scientists must theorize about the dinosaur's skin colors. A Gigantosaurus hunted smaller prey, so it is likely that the appearance of its skin allowed it to blend into the surroundings in order to surprise its victims. The Gigantosaurus lived in the grassy wetlands of what is now Argentina, an environment similar to the African savanna. Therefore, this dinosaur probably had skin that closely matched the colors of the vegetation around it. The Gigantosaurus carolini lived about 100 million years ago, some 30 million years before the Tyrannosaurus rex that roamed North America. Despite many similarities between the two creatures, scientists have stated that the two are not closely related and that each species developed independently. So that was our story about the Gigantosaurus, the T-Rex's big brother. I hope you learned something new you didn't know about dinosaurs before. And now let's move on to talk about the 10 words I promised we would talk about. And let's start with our very first word, paleontologist. It is spelled Paleontologist. paleontologist. What does that mean? Now, first, let's take a look at it in context. Now, we said for many years, paleontologists thought that the Tyrannosaurus rex was the largest meat-eating dinosaurs ever to roam the earth. But of course, they found out that this is wrong. When we talk about paleontologists, we're talking about these people who study dinosaurs. But it is not only dinosaurs that they study. A paleontologist is a scientist who studies paleontology, obviously, which is the study of fossils as a guide to the history of life on Earth. Now, of course, dinosaurs is a big part of their study because they form the big part of the fossils we study from prehistory. But that doesn't mean that they just study dinosaurs. Maybe dinosaurs is the main study, but they study other fossils as well. So, this is the meaning of paleontologist. Now let's move on to talk about the next word, amateur. A-M-A-T-E-U-R. Amateur. Now let's take a look how we use that in context. We said, however, an auto mechanic and amateur scientist named Ruben Carolini discovered some bones in Argentina. Now, here we're talking about an auto mechanic and we're talking about a scientist, but not a regular scientist, not a professional scientist, an amateur scientist. What does that mean? An amateur is someone who does something as a hobby and not as a job. So here we can tell that Ruben Carolini was not a professional paleontologist, was not working as a paleontologist. He was an amateur scientist. He was a hobbyist. But he happened to make one of the biggest discoveries in the world of dinosaurs, and that is the Gigantosaurus. So we can say that amateur is the opposite of professional, a non-professional. And that brings us to our next word, unseat. U-N-S-E-A-T. Now let's take a look how we use that in context. We said this discovery was to unseat Tyrannosaurus rex from its position as the largest meat-eating dinosaur. So what does that mean? Unseat Tyrannosaurus rex. When people try to unseat a person who is in an important job or position, they try to remove him or her from that job or position. Now, here we're not talking about a person, we're talking about Tyrannosaurus rex. But this discovery, or the Gigantosaurus, which was called later the Gigantosaurus, was to unseat Tyrannosaurus rex. Tyrannosaurus rex was considered the largest meat-eating dinosaur, number one. So this Gigantosaurus unseated Tyrannosaurus rex, removed Tyrannosaurus rex from this position. So there you go, that's the meaning of unseat. Now let's move on and talk about the next word, and that is exhume. E-X-H-U-M-E. Exhume. Now let's take a look at the context. How did we use that in our story? We said after the initial find, scientists exhumed additional pieces of the Gigantosaurus skeleton. So they exhumed additional pieces, additional bones, obviously. What does that mean? If a dead person's body is exhumed, it is taken out of the ground where it is buried, especially so that it can be examined in order to find out how the person died. Now, obviously, here we're not talking about a person, we're talking about a dinosaur, but it's kind of the same thing. They tried to dig up the bones of this Gigantosaurus, or this dinosaur they didn't know about before, and they put the pieces together to figure out the size, the shape, etc. of this dinosaurs. They wanted to examine it. We're not talking about tomb robbers here. We're talking about scientists who do that to study. Now, of course, if we're talking about people, that is usually in cases of crimes, and they try to solve a crime by exhuming the body. But in this case, these are scientists, and they were trying to find out what this creature looked like. And that's why they exhumed additional pieces of the Gigantosaurus skeleton. And now for our next word, serrated. S-E-R-R-A-T-E-D. Now let's take a look how we use that in context. Now we said each of the curved teeth was 8 inches long and serrated like a saw. So here, what does that mean? Serrated like a saw. We know from context that serrated is exactly like the saw. What is special about the saw? Now, A serrated object, such as a knife or blade, has a row of V-shaped points along the edge, like bread knives. But in our context, obviously, we're talking about the teeth of this Gigantosaurus. So we're talking about the shape of his teeth, and that is serrated, like a saw. Now for our next word, estimate. E-S-T-I-M-A-T-E. Now let's take a look how we use that in context. We said scientists were able to estimate the dinosaur's size and appearance. When you say estimate, do you think that this is exact science? This is just like looking at something and describing it exactly as it is, or you exactly know what it is? Not really. If you estimate quantity or value, you make an approximate judgment or calculation of it. Now, in the case of Gigantosaurus, they have to, because they can't see the animal. They've just discovered a couple of bones, and they put the bones together, and usually not all the bones are there, so they have to make an estimate. They have to estimate the rest of it. So it's like an approximate judgment or calculation. Now, of course, in other areas, sometimes they have to estimate because not all the times you have the time or you have enough data to know the exact answer. Sometimes you don't have all the data, so you have to make an estimate, and sometimes you don't have time. So you have to make an estimate first, then you can calculate correctly or calculate precisely. So estimate is not calculating precisely, it's calculating roughly. And by the way, you might have noticed that I'm saying estimate and estimate. And that is because the pronunciation is different. When I use estimate as a verb, I say estimate. But when I use estimate as a noun, like when you say make an estimate, that's a noun here, which has the same spelling, by the way. But if you use it as a noun, you say estimate, not estimate. Estimate is a verb. So that is our word. And now let's move on to talk about the next word, and that is attribute. A-T-T-R-I-B-U-T-E. Attribute. Now let's see how we use that in context. Now, we said scientists do not know exactly what the Gigantosaurus ate, but its teeth have all the attributes of meat-eating animals. So when we talk about attributes, what are we talking about? An attribute is a quality or feature that someone or something has, and here we're talking about the attributes of meat-eating animals. So this Gigantosaurus, or its teeth, has all the attributes of meat-eating animals, and that led scientists to conclude that this great beast was a carnivore. So that is the meaning of attribute. An attribute is a quality or feature that someone or something has. And now let's move on to the next word, theorize. 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 Now let's take a look at how we use that in context. We said because skeletal remains of dinosaurs do not include skin, scientists must theorize about the dinosaur's skin colors. So it is kind of like estimate, but not exactly. That is coming up with a theory based on some facts and some deductions. So it is a little bit more sophisticated than just an estimate, but it is still not exact data. If you theorize that something is true or theorize about it, you develop an abstract idea or set of ideas about something in order to explain it. That is just like speculate. Like, for example, if you say police are theorizing that the killers may be posing as hitchhikers, that is just a theory. Based on facts, based on some deductions, that's fine, but still a theory. These are not facts. We don't know for sure, or the police in this case don't know for sure, but they're theorizing. So here, scientists must theorize because obviously when they find the bones of a dinosaur, they don't find the skin. The skin and flesh decayed a long time ago, so they have to theorize based on the bones, or actually based on the few bones they find. So that is the meaning of theorize. Now let's move on to the next word, and that is prey. P-R-E-Y. Now let's take a look how we use that in context. We said a Gigantosaurus hunted smaller prey. So it is likely that the appearance of its skin allowed it to blend into the surroundings. Anyway, here we're not talking about how it hunted, but we're talking about what it hunted. A Gigantosaurus hunted smaller prey. That is the word. And when we say, for example, a creature's prey, these are the creatures that it hunts and eats in order to live. So that is when you watch any kind of shows about animals, you will see that some animals prey on other animals. Now, that doesn't have to be bad because these creatures eat those other creatures in order to live. Now, of course, that can be used in a very bad context. Now, people can prey on other people in many different ways, and here, of course, we don't have to. Some people do that because they're bad. But when we use that in the animal kingdom, we're talking about creatures that hunt other creatures to eat in order to survive. And obviously, the hunter is called predator, and the hunted creature is called the prey. So predator and prey. In this case, of course, our Gigantosaurus was the predator, and other smaller animals were the prey. And now for our final word for this episode, and that is vegetation. V-E-G-E-T-A-T-I-O-N. Vegetation. Now let's take a look at how we use that in context. We said, therefore, this dinosaur probably had skin that closely matched the colors of the vegetation around it. So, what is the meaning of vegetation? Now, vegetation is simply plants, trees, and flowers. Now, of course, we can say plants, trees, and flowers, but plants, trees, and flowers sometimes can be referred to as vegetation, as one word, like when we say plants in general or flora. So, you can use this one word to talk about all plants, trees, and flowers in general. Vegetation. And that is everything I wanted to share with you folks. So thank you very much for listening to another episode from English Plus. Don't forget, we have a subscription for Plus Podcast Network. English Plus is now part of Plus Podcast Network. Of course, don't worry about English Plus. It will always be free. Nothing is going to change, but actually we're adding it to a big family. We have 20 shows in Plus Podcast Network. Some of them are free, some of them are premium. You can have access to all of them by subscribing to the channel, to the Plus Podcast Network channel on Apple Podcasts, and there is a 7-day free trial if you want to try it out and see what you can get with this subscription before you commit to the subscription. Or if you don't have Apple Podcasts and you want to enjoy all our premium shows on our website, EnglishPlusPodcast.com, you can become a patron of Plus Podcast Network on Patreon, and then you will have access to all the premium shows on our website, EnglishPlusPodcast.com. And with that aside, don't forget that with Word Power, we have a PDF downloadable worksheet for you that has crossword puzzles, multiple choice, word search, some activities that you can use to practice the words that you've learned in this episode. And by the way, I also include the words we learned in the previous Word Power episode. So it is a good opportunity for you to remember what we talked about last week as well. So go to our website and download this PDF and practice anytime you want. And if you don't like paper and you like interactive activities more, we've got you covered as well, because we have interactive activities on our website as well. You can find the link in the description. The link is not going to take you only to our website. It's going to take you to the custom post we created for this episode. So take the link and take your English with it to the next level. And don't forget to check out our other podcasts that are free. Even if you don't want to subscribe now, maybe you will change your mind later. We've added a lot of other interesting shows for free. You can find them on our website. But just remember, for the premium podcasts, you can either subscribe on Apple Podcasts or on our website using Patreon. With that being said, this is your host, Danny. Thank you very much for listening to another episode from English Plus Podcast. I will see you next time.